Alright, so I'm back, and today we're going to do another episode of How Are They Holding Up? And after all the talk about Seekers this week, I thought this would be a good time to take us probably one last look at the classic Seeker mold. This is the Generations Thrust. This was gifted to me by a friend. And because he said that it just didn't seem right to not have him included into the reviews. So that is where this particular figure has come from. I believe I do have other ones laying around somewhere, but that is where this particular one came from. And he's been sitting next to my review shelf pretty much this whole time since then. And he does make appearances here and there, like whenever I feel it's relevant. But yeah, let's talk about him, and then also just like a little history lesson onto the classic Seeker mold. Just kind of a walk down memory lane for those of you that remember it, and then and also, for those people that didn't live through this time, they can see like Hasbro really hasn't learned their lesson with this thing at all. It's funny. But anyway, let's get into it. So he's got this nice metallic swirled plastic throughout the whole body, or all the whatever color you'd call that, reddish color. Brain fart going on there. With the darker gray wings. He actually has chrome underneath the yellow clear plastic on the canopy, which makes it pop pretty well. And yeah, he's got these ginormous null rays, because they have to have the gimmick of firing. And that's just really unfortunate, because they really are just obnoxiously large for him. The head is on a swivel, so you get the left and right. And then the arms do swivel up, hinge out to the side. There's a backwards butterfly. Bends at the elbow, nothing at the wrist except for hinge in. Hips up to there, back to there, out to the side. They're on ball joints, so they get a little bit of a thigh swivel. Bends at the knee, swivel right above the knee, and the toe kind of tilts. So this has the imprint of 2006 on there, making this a 16-year-old figure. And for 16 years, I think it's still a pretty decent representation of the Seeker mold. And for a long time there, it was probably my favorite version of the Seeker mold, especially for classics. Since these things came out, they did. Let's see. They did like the War for Cybertron ones. They did the Combiner Wars ones. They tried to do Power of the Primes ones, and that was a huge failure. Then they did the Siege one. Those things pretty much suck. And then they did the Earthrise ones, and it's like finally, years and years, over a decade later, they finally are like, oh, hey, you know what? John's right. I'm just being facetious there, but just like. Because I always said, I wish that they would just upscale this to Voyager class. And that's essentially what the Earthrise is this upscale to Voyager class with a few improvements. But, the thing is about this is just, a lot of companies haven't learned the lesson that Hasbro forged with the original Seeker mold. So to remind people how this all played out, we got Starscream with the Classics line. A short time later, we got Skywarp in a 2-pack with a white Optimus Prime called Ultra Magnus. This was a Target exclusive, and it became really hard to find really quickly. And then they did Ramjet. Those were all 3 in the Classics line. And that was it. That's all we got to start with. A little while later, because they had canceled the Classics line, they did a BotCon set that had Dirge, Thrust, and Thundercracker in it. These things were notoriously bad with QC, including wrong parts assembled, and then they also became extremely difficult to find. Very expensive in the aftermarket. I think it was Dawn of Futures Past was the line, I think. I don't know. They came with a big box set with a repaint of Jetfire as Dreadwing as well. So, not satisfied with that, Takara decided, like, okay, we're going to do Thrust, Dirge, Thundercracker, and Skywarp, part of their Henkei line. And they also did, Starscream and Ramjet as well. But the Skywarp and Thundercracker were released as like a mall exclusive, and so was the Thrust and the Dirge. So those also became very hard to get. I remember buying the Skywarp I remember buying the Thundercracker for $80. And was really disappointed because like the null rays wouldn't hold into his arms. I mean, he was just a floppy mess. And then I remember buying the Thrust and Dirge exclusives at one point too, and had it, like, I can't remember how much they were, but I remember I had to make payments on these figures. They were so expensive at the time too. It's like at the time I was making a lot less money. Nowadays it would have been like nothing, but at the same time it's still like ridiculous that you had to spend that kind of money to get those things. This led rise to the CHMS Seekers. Those were repaints. They were knockoffs and repaints of the other Seekers, and this is where I keep saying, like, KO with a purpose, because they filled this void very quickly of these Seekers that were exclusives or were really shit quality, and they were producing them and selling them for like I think $25 a piece, if I remember. And at the time these guys were about $15 a piece, so they were a little bit pricier, but they were still cheaper than those exclusives. Imagine, when you're sitting there like, oh, this is a $15 deluxe, and you have to spend $70-something for something with really bad quality. So this KO company came along, and they resolved that situation. I bought a bunch of stuff from them when they were coming out, and I can also say, like, the customer service there was great, because I remember I had one that it broke out of packaging, and they sent me a brand new one. Like, no questions asked, just here you go. So that was pretty great. Pretty solid company there. I think I know where they ended up, and it's one of those, like, I think they actually became a bigger company, but I'm not going to point fingers or name names or anything like that, because I have no proof. So anyway, so yeah, those KO Seekers were great, and then Universe 2.0 came along for Hasbro, and so they were like, okay, we need to release the Seeker mold in here, and rather than doing one of the missing Seekers that we've all been, we were all clamoring for, they did Acid Storm, and then later on they did a white Starscream. It was just like, what is going on? Why are you jumping around and not giving us the Seekers that we're wanting, and you're doing these weird exclusive repaints, and that's something that has carried on to this day. You look at Earthrise Starscream. It's like you get the Starscream in the store, right? And then you get Thundercracker and Skywarp as an exclusive 2-pack, I think Target exclusive, and then you get Ramjet and Dirge as Amazon exclusives, and then you get Thrust as a Target exclusive, and it's just like random exclusives with these things, and then you get the Coronation Kit Starscream released as a standard release, and it's like stuff like that. It's like that doesn't make sense, and it's like, why are you going out of your way to make these things harder to get? And then they sit there, they're like, oh well, sales aren't going very well for the Acid Storm and the Starscream, so we better just not release any more Seekers. And it's just like, are you kidding me? They're basing these things, like the release schedule, off of like how well X is doing, but X is, a really bad way to judge. It's just like they set the market up for failure, and then they decide that it's not worth trying anymore. And I don't think they realize the power of the main 6 Seekers. There's so much repaint potential with that mold, and they can just print money off of them. I've said that before this week too. And it's just like it's the truth. You usually break even. You don't make much profit with the first mold. You pretty much break even because molds cost a lot of money, and it's the repaints reissues and repaints that you really make money off of. And the Seekers are the prime example of how to do it right. And let's while we're on the topic, remember Masterpiece. They did MP03, and then they did. There was a couple versions of Starscream, and then they did Skywarp, and then they did Thundercracker, and then they did the MP11 mold. Starscream was released as a standard MP, but the majority of the rest were some sort of exclusives, and they were costing upwards of $200 a piece. And then they randomly Toys R Us is going to get Acid Storm and Thundercracker and Sunstorm, but they never got the Coneheads, and they never got Skywarp. And it's just like, why would you jump to Acid Storm before you did Skywarp? It's like, just get these guys done, the main 6 done, and then do the repaints as the exclusives. That's the way to do it. And even Make Toys fell into that trap. It's like they did. They did Skywar, they did the main 3, and then they did Dirge, and then they start doing weird things like, I think from what I've rumors, they were mismanaging the money pretty poorly, but they were doing things like, the Sunstorm was a fun, a crowdfunded thing. The Acid Storm was a TF Source exclusive. The original purple one was crowdfunded, but it failed, and then it became a TF Source exclusive. Then there's the blue one that's a TF Source exclusive, and then the G2 one, which I think was a convention exclusive. But it's just like, you really should just focus on, getting the main 6 out right away. The faster you get the main 6 out, the faster you're going to make money, and you're going to make up for what you lost for the mold. So, all that being said, I just think it's just interesting that after all of this time, Hasbro, Takara, Make Toys, Deformation Space, and the Yes model and the BB7s, they all fell into this trap of just not doing the right figures for the right time. The BB7 and the Yes model, they start putting out their knockoffs of the MP11 mold, but where they should have started was with the multicolored ones, not the main crew, because we've been dealing with the main crew this whole time, and we've been wanting the rest of the Rainmakers. It's like it doesn't make sense. They started making these guys shortly before Takara did, but I don't think they beat Takara to release. I believe that's how it worked out. But and it's like, you look at this, and then you look at this, and it's just like, this guy seems miles above this guy in design. Like, he is just that much better. Another thing to mention on these guys is there were one earlier classics line, right? And as such, when the third parties are first coming out, there's clamoring to find things that they can do to make money off of these things. So, there was null ray sets for all of the Seekers. I did a review on those years and years ago when it first came out. Guilty Hunger, I think it was. And it was like one set, and it had pretty much all of the Seekers null rays in there, and it was great. I absolutely love that set. It was a huge benefit to, adding on to the existing figures. And it fixed the one big glaring issue with them. And then there was a Coronation kit for the Starscream that came out, which was pretty awesome. Also came with the null rays. And at one point it was on clearance, and I was actually buying a bunch of them so that I could repaint the null rays for them, because that was before the Guilty Hunger set came out. And then, you compare it to like the Earthrise, or this is the Studio 86, I guess. But you compare that to the Starscream, and you've almost got the same figure. He's got more posability and just overall looks a little bit better, more mature. But it did exactly what I wanted it to do, which was take a lot of cues from this mold and just upscale them, essentially. And that's exactly what they needed to do here. But it's still funny that how much better this one looks than he does. And he actually, in my opinion, looks better than this one. This one just functions better and scales better with your classic, or with your current Chug collection. Because, he should have always been a Voyager. He shouldn't have been a Deluxe. But at the time, they weren't really caring too much about scale. Bumblebee was the same size as them. So it's just like they were just, they had, essentially with the Classics line, they had two price points that they were able to work with. There was Deluxe and there was Voyager. So the only ones that became Voyagers were Optimus, Megatron, and Jetfire. I think that was it. And everything else got to be crammed in the Deluxe scale. So you had the Seekers, Astro Train, Bumblebee, Grimlock, Mirage. I know Ironhide came out in Universe 2.0. But it's like they had to cram as many things as they could into the Deluxe line. So it's not really their fault that he was too small. But I do say, I still to this day say, he is the best looking of these Seekers. He's just a functionally better Seeker. And looks, he looks great because he's taking a lot of cues from him. So he's a very acceptable one. So about at the end of the day, like, do I recommend this figure still? Yes and no. Yes, because it's a fun walk down memory lane to pick them up. And even at the aftermarket prices, sometimes you're going to get them cheaper than you will these guys, because a lot of these guys are those exclusives. I mean, I've seen that Dirge and Ramjet go for upwards of $300 for the 2-pack. $300 for them. It's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. It's ridiculous. Why would you spend $300 for two Voyagers? I've spent an insane amount on these Deluxes in the past. But it's just you shouldn't have to, is my point. And yeah. So I recommend it for the memory lane wise, or if you're just like wanting to do like a Seeker collection. I think they're a great footnote in the Seeker legacy that shouldn't be missed. But for a modern collection, I can't recommend them because they're just too small. Here he is with Kickback, who's just a little bit shorter than him, and that's not quite right. And here he is with Megatron, and he's so small next to the Megatron that it just doesn't work. He never really scaled well with anything. He's too big for Legends and too small for Chug. It's pretty much got to be a collection onto its own. So if you're in for that, then I'd give them a solid 10. These things are great. They have their faults and stuff like that, but they're so old that it's just charm at this point. It's got its charm. But if you're doing a modern collection, it'd be a 1 out of 10. You can make the argument that they fit, because of one episode where they're a little bit shorter than Megatron. You can make that argument, but it's a stretch, guys. It's a stretch. But yeah, I do recommend, I think any modern collector should at least pick one up just to mess with, because they're fun. They're so much fun to flip around too. I mean, you get them into jet mode in like no time. Now I gotta prove it. So it's like, it's just, they're so easy to transform, and the way the robot mode looks, the robot mode looks great, and then the jet mode looks pretty good too. So it's just a case of they really simplified the transformation to make it fun and quick and easy. I'll just put these up here. And so there you go. It took like no time to get him into robot or into jet mode, and for the most part, he's got visible head syndrome. The standard Seekers don't, but he does. Oh, and I almost forgot that there was actually an exclusive. I think a Hidden K exclusives. I can't remember the name of them, but it was a 3-pack of the cone heads and a 3-pack of the regular ones, and those were pretty solid sets too. I'm pretty sure I looked at those at some point. And then you plug the null rays in under the wings, of course. Actually, his look better back here, I believe. Yeah. So yeah, it's just they're fun to mess with. They're fun to flip around. There's outside of the size of the null rays, there's not a lot I could say is just that didn't age well with them. Just the scale was just never right. And you don't get a transformation like this very often anymore, where not only does it pull off both the modes pretty easily, but it also is quick and easy. Like it just does it so well. For a modern collector, I would recommend, if you've never messed with one, I recommend picking at least one of them up just to mess with. And then for Seeker collectors, they're a must-have. They're infinitely better than the MP that we had. It's just, this is why, like, when you take this and, like, when it comes to the look of the Seeker, I think, like, modern MP looks better, of course, and the modern, like, Make Toys ones look better. But I think those are the only ones. Those are the true upgrades to this. It's just, yes, the Earthrise one is an upgrade to it, but it's just kind of like, it also feels like it's just a bigger version of the same thing, if that makes sense. So it's like I almost can't give them credit for that one. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just rambling now at this point, so I guess I'm done.